When Eleanor Price first saw the house, it felt like a memory trying to crawl its way back into her head. It sat at the edge of the woods, 3 miles outside the village of Cold Ash. The air around it always seemed colder, as though the sunlight couldn't quite decide whether to touch its roof. She stood at the front gate that morning in late October, her breath fogging the air, the crunch of frost beneath her boots, sharp and lonely. The realtor's key trembled slightly as she turned it in the lock, and Eleanor thought absurdly that it sounded like a sigh escaping the house itself. Inside, dust motes drifted lazily in thin beams of light filtering through stained glass. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender and something else. Wet earth, maybe, or old rain trapped behind walls. She moved slowly through each room, her fingers brushing against wallpaper that had begun to peel like dead skin. She tried to imagine what it would look like once restored. Clean, bright, full of life again. She had come to Cold Ash to escape the city, to rebuild something. She wasn't sure if it was the house or herself. For the first hour, everything was still. Then she noticed the rhythm. It began faintly, a distant tick, 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 that didn't belong to any clock she'd seen. At first, she assumed it came from the old pipes, but as she stood perfectly still, she realized it was coming from upstairs. Eleanor hesitated, one hand on the banister, her breath tight in her throat. The house settled with a creak, but the ticking didn't stop. She climbed the stairs anyway. At the end of the corridor was a narrow door, half hidden behind a faded tapestry. She pulled the fabric aside and turned the handle. The door resisted at first, swollen with years of damp, then gave way with a slow, aching groan. The attic was small, lit by a single circular window like a blind eye. Sheets covered old furniture, their shapes strange and hunched. In the far corner stood a wooden trunk. The ticking was louder now, steady as a heartbeat. She knelt and lifted the lid. Inside was a metronome. Its pendulum swung lazily, though there was no wind, no vibration, no reason for it to move. It was an antique, carved with initials that time had almost erased. E.P. Her initials. Eleanor stared, the world narrowing to that impossible detail. Then, as if acknowledging her recognition, the metronome stopped. That night she dreamed of the house again, only it wasn't quite the same. The walls pulsed gently as if breathing. The furniture shifted slightly when she wasn't looking. A whisper seemed to crawl from room to room. "Welcome back." She woke before dawn, heart pounding, the echo of those words still lodged behind her ribs. For the next few days, she tried to rationalize everything. The metronome could have been coincidence, the dream just stress. Yet as she cleaned and unpacked, she began to find other strange things. A child's shoe beneath a floorboard. A photograph of a woman who looked unsettlingly like her, though the picture was clearly a century old. Notes scribbled in the margins of a book in handwriting that mirrored her own. Each night, she heard the metronome ticking again, though she had locked it in the attic trunk. By the end of the week, Eleanor had stopped pretending it didn't disturb her. The silence in the house was too complete, broken only by the occasional sigh of wood or the whisper of something that seemed to move behind her.
The villagers were polite, but distant. When she mentioned the house, their eyes slid away. The shopkeeper at the corner store finally muttered, "Some places remember too much, miss. Best leave the past where it belongs." Eleanor smiled, said she wasn't superstitious, and left quickly before he could see how cold her hands had grown. Back at the house, the lights flickered when she stepped inside. The air carried a faint vibration, like a voice at the edge of hearing. She tried to shake it off and went to make tea. When she reached for a mug, she froze. On the counter sat the metronome, still, silent, perfectly centered. Her mind blanked. She hadn't gone into the attic. She hadn't touched that trunk since the day she arrived. But there it was, gleaming faintly, as if freshly polished. She lifted it carefully. Beneath it was a slip of paper folded in half. Her own handwriting stared back at her. "Don't forget to wind it this time." Her knees nearly gave way. She dropped the paper, her pulse hammering so loud she almost didn't hear it. The sound of the pendulum beginning to swing again, slow and deliberate. Tick, tick, tick. She backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. "This isn't real," she whispered. "It's stress, exhaustion." Then came the voice, faint but unmistakable, from somewhere upstairs. "You left me waiting." Eleanor turned toward the staircase. The sound of slow, deliberate steps followed, not hers. The boards creaked one by one, descending. She wanted to run, but something deep inside her, something old and familiar, told her she had been here before, that she had made these same steps once ago. The door at the top of the stairs opened with a soft click. Shadows stretched along the hallway like spilled ink. The air thickened. The house seemed to lean closer, listening. And then, as if the world itself took a breath, everything went still. The metronome stopped. Eleanor didn't remember falling asleep, but when she opened her eyes, it was morning. She was lying on the floor near the front door, her body stiff, the light pale and strange. The house was quiet again. She tried to convince herself it had been sleepwalking. She even laughed softly, the sound brittle. But when she looked down, there was dust smeared across the floor. Footprints, leading from the attic to where she now lay. The footprints weren't hers. They were smaller, bare, and they stopped directly beside her face. For the rest of the morning, Eleanor tried not to look at the footprints. She scrubbed the floor with shaking hands, but the dust only smeared deeper into the boards, almost as if the wood refused to let the marks go. The air carried a faint sweetness, like rotting fruit, and no matter how many windows she opened, the smell clung to her clothes and hair. By afternoon, she forced herself to go back into town. The sky was the color of wet ash, and the air had that strange heaviness that comes before a storm. The local library sat across from the church, small, old, and dimly lit. She went in hoping to find something about the house's history. The librarian, a woman in her 60s with thin spectacles and an expression like worn paper, glanced up when Eleanor approached the desk. "I'm looking for records, old property deeds or newspapers. The house near the woods, number 19 Cold Ash Lane." The librarian's face changed, almost imperceptibly. "That house?" she said quietly. "Yes," Eleanor replied, trying to sound casual. "I'm restoring it." The librarian hesitated, then led her to a back room filled with yellowed binders and dust. "There were accidents there," she murmured. "I don't know how much was ever written down." Eleanor nodded. She didn't ask for details. The files were brittle, the ink faded to a ghostly brown. The oldest article she found was in 1912. Local family found dead in sleep. No sign of struggle. No poison. Doctors baffled. The house passed to distant relatives. In 1937, another note. Widow found wandering woods after husband's disappearance. In 1964, a child went missing, last seen near the property. Each entry felt colder than the last. The family names changed, but one detail was constant. Each time, the articles mentioned a woman who had moved there recently, alone. Eleanor's hands trembled as she turned the pages. At the bottom of the 1964 clipping, written in pen darker than the rest, someone had scrawled, "The house dreams of them all." When she returned home, twilight had fallen hard,
and mist was crawling between the trees. The lights inside flickered as she entered, and for a moment she could have sworn she saw a silhouette in the upstairs window, a child's outline, standing very still. She told herself it was reflection, that's all. She made dinner but couldn't eat. The storm finally broke. Rain battered the windows like desperate fingers. Somewhere deep in the house, something began to hum.
It wasn't mechanical. It was lower, alive. The sound vibrated in her ribs, threading through the floorboards. She followed it to the living room, where the metronome now sat on the mantel, perfectly balanced, pendulum swaying even though she hadn't wound it. Tick, tick, tick. The humming stopped. The lights died. In the darkness, Eleanor whispered, "What do you want?" Something moved behind her. A breath touched the back of her neck, cold as water. Then a whisper, almost gentle, "To finish what you started." She spun around, but there was no one there, only the faint shape of the furniture and the reflection of lightning on the glass. She turned the metronome face down. It kept ticking. That night, she dreamed again, or thought she did. She stood in the attic, but everything was reversed, mirrored, wrong. The furniture was covered in cloth that pulsed faintly, like the rise and fall of lungs. The walls shimmered, soft as skin. A small figure stood in the corner, facing away. A child, no older than 8, dressed in white, hair hanging over its face. Eleanor tried to speak, but her throat closed. The child turned. Its eyes were hollow, wet, glistening like something freshly born. When it spoke, its voice was layered, both a whisper and a scream. "You left the door open." The attic door behind her slammed shut. She woke gasping, sweat chilling her skin. The clock read 3:03 a.m., the same time as the night before, the same tick of silence after the metronome stopped. Eleanor reached for her flashlight to turn on the flashlight. The screen flickered once, then went black. The power was still out. From upstairs came the sound of something dragging slowly across the floor. She lit a candle and started up the staircase. The flame trembled violently, though there was no wind. At the top, she hesitated and noticed the narrow door to the attic was open. Inside, the metronome sat on the trunk again. It wasn't moving. Eleanor stepped closer. On the wall, something had been written in charcoal, lines jagged and uneven. Her candlelight revealed the words, "I dreamed of you first." She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The sound echoed too long, as if the room were larger than it should be. Her candle went out. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of her breathing. Then, faintly, another, shallow, rapid, behind her. She turned, but the darkness was absolute. Her hand found the wall. She took one step toward the door, then another, and then the metronome began again. Tick, 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 tick. Faster this time, urgent. She ran. The stairs blurred beneath her. She nearly slipped, caught herself, reached the bottom, just as lightning flashed through the windows. In that split second of light, she saw herself, standing at the top of the stairs. The reflection was exact, down to the torn sleeve and candle wax on her fingers. Except the other her was smiling. The light vanished. Eleanor didn't sleep again that night. She sat in the kitchen until dawn, every muscle trembling. When sunlight finally touched the floor, she dared to move. She searched the entire house, the attic, the cellar, even the crawl space behind the kitchen wall. Nothing. No sign of the child, no footprints, no shadow that wasn't hers. But on the counter, next to her half-drunk cup of tea, lay another slip of paper. Same handwriting, same paper. "Don't let her in this time." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She didn't know who her was, but she was starting to believe the house did. By afternoon, Eleanor decided she couldn't stay another night. She packed quickly, hands shaking, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. But when she tried the front door, it wouldn't open.
The key turned, but the latch refused to move, as though welded shut. Panic began to rise, prickling along her skin. She ran to the back door. Same thing. The windows wouldn't budge. Outside, the sky had gone pale gray, as if the world beyond the glass were only a painted backdrop.
She pressed her hand to the pane. It was cold, but there was something else. A faint pulse beneath the surface, like a heartbeat trapped in the glass. The metronome started again. Tick, tick, tick. Eleanor screamed and threw it across the room. It hit the wall, splintered, and still she heard it. Then, over the ticking, came the child's voice again. Soft, closer than before. You never left. You never left me. The lights flickered once, then stayed on, glowing faintly red as if the bulbs themselves had begun to bleed. Eleanor sank to her knees, clutching her head, and the house, finally, exhaled. The red light faded slowly, but it never quite went away. Even in daylight, the rooms of the house carried a faint blush, as though every wall remembered that strange glow. Eleanor drifted through the day like someone underwater. She avoided the attic, avoided the mirrors, avoided her own thoughts. She told herself she only needed rest, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes, a child's hand pressed against glass, a door creaking open, her own reflection smiling back at her with teeth that weren't hers. She didn't call anyone. There was no one left to call. Her mother had died 2 years ago, and her brother hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. Not since she'd told him what she remembered, or what she thought she remembered. She'd never told anyone else about the dreams from her childhood, about the house that came back every night, whispering her name through walls that seemed to breathe. But now, walking through these corridors, she realized something terrifying. This was that house. Every corner, every turn of the staircase, every smell of lavender and earth. It had been in her dreams long before she found it. She tried to distract herself with cleaning, scrubbing, and repairing, but the house resisted. Wallpaper peeled again overnight. Nails she hammered in the walls bent or vanished by morning. And the metronome, she'd destroyed it, yet its rhythm still returned, faint and distant, like the heartbeat of the house itself. By dusk, exhaustion had numbed her fear. She poured a glass of wine, sat by the fire, and told herself out loud, "Tomorrow I leave. I don't care if I have to break a window." The flames cracked softly. Behind her, a chair creaked. She turned. There, in the faint light, sat a figure, small, still, almost delicate. A child, bare feet dangling just above the floor. "Who are you?" Eleanor whispered. The child tilted her head. "You know?" No, I don't." "Yes, you do." The girl's voice was distant and layered, like it was coming from inside the walls. "You built this place. You just forgot." Lightning flickered through the window, illuminating her face, and Eleanor's breath caught. It was her own face, not as she was now, but as a child. The glass of wine slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. When she looked again, the girl was gone. Only the chair remained, gently rocking. Eleanor pressed her hands to her temples. "I'm losing my mind," she said. "It's stress, just stress." But deep down, a smaller voice whispered that this wasn't madness,
It was memory. That night, she didn't try to sleep. She sat by the window, watching the trees bend in the wind. The mist from the woods had crept closer, curling around the porch like smoke. At some point, she realized the window glass had grown damp, as if someone were breathing on the other side. She wiped it with her sleeve. Words appeared where her hand had passed. "Wake up." Eleanor stumbled back, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She turned and saw that every mirror in the house was fogged from within. In each one, something moved.
Not a reflection, a presence. She forced herself toward the hallway mirror, reached out, and the image reached back, not quite in sync. Her fingertips touched the glass. It rippled like water. She gasped and yanked her hand back, but a faint, wet handprint remained, smaller than hers. The air grew thick with the smell of damp soil, and from deep inside the house, the whisper came again. "You left the door open." At dawn, Eleanor packed what she could carry and ran to the nearest window. She hurled a chair against it, but instead of breaking, the glass flexed and pulsed like skin. It even shuddered when she struck it again, almost in pain. The house was alive. She dropped the chair and fled to the basement, hoping for some forgotten exit. The air grew colder as she descended, heavy with rot and something older than dust. At the bottom of the stairs was a stone wall, and on it, faint symbols carved into the mortar. Circles intersecting, runes tangled together like veins. A single phrase, barely legible beneath the grime. "We sleep, so she can dream." Eleanor backed away. Her shoulder brushed something. Fabric, soft and old. She turned and saw a row of covered shapes, tall and human-sized. She hesitated, then pulled one sheet away. Beneath it stood a figure, her height, her shape, but its face was blank wood, carved only with faint impressions of features. It looked like an unfinished sculpture. The next one was the same, and the next. Dozens of them, arranged in silence, like waiting bodies. Her stomach twisted. Each had a word carved into its chest. Daughter, mother, Eleanor. Her own name repeated on several, some newer, some older, each carved deeper, the letters growing rougher and less human toward the end. She stumbled back, covering her mouth. The air began to hum again, that same low vibration that seemed to come from the bones of the house itself. The floor trembled softly. The walls exhaled. Then came the creak of footsteps descending the stairs behind her. She turned. The child stood there, her younger self, pale and luminous in the dark. "Don't you see?" the girl said softly. "You built us so you'd never be alone." "What are you talking about?" Eleanor's voice cracked. The girl smiled. "You're still dreaming. You always are." Eleanor backed toward the wall. "No, this is real. I'm awake." The child tilted her head. "Are you?" The basement light flickered, once, twice, then went out. In the dark, the hum became a chorus of breathing. Dozens of faint voices whispering the same word. Stay. When light returned, she was upstairs again, though she didn't remember climbing. The clock on the wall read 3:03 a.m. Her reflection in the glass of the window looked different, slightly delayed. Its mouth moved after hers like a puppet catching up to its master.
Eleanor pressed her hand against the pane again, and her reflection smiled. The same cold, knowing smile she'd seen before. Then, the reflection whispered, "You never left this house." Her hand fell away. She staggered back, the truth forming in her mind like a wound tearing open. Maybe she hadn't found this house by accident. Maybe it had found her. Maybe it had waited. That night, the metronome returned one last time, though she couldn't see it. The ticking came from everywhere. The walls, the floors, her own heartbeat. Tick, tick, tick. It slowed, matching her breath, then stopped. And in that vast silence, Eleanor finally heard what had been hiding beneath the rhythm all along, the sound of something else, faint and deep, inhaling with her. The house was dreaming.
And it was dreaming her. By morning, Eleanor no longer knew how long she'd been inside. The clocks all showed different times. Her phone battery, though she hadn't charged it for days, never seemed to die. Its screen froze at 3:03 a.m., the numbers pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. She moved through the house in a trance, feeling watched but also accompanied. When she touched the walls, she could feel warmth beneath the paint, like muscle beneath skin. It pulsed gently beneath her fingertips, responding to her touch. The whispering had changed too. It no longer sounded distant. It came from within her thoughts, finishing sentences before she could. Sometimes she thought it was her mother's voice. Other times it was her own, younger and afraid. By noon, rain began again, heavy, endless, as though the sky were trying to drown the house. The windows wept condensation. The air shimmered faintly with a low electric hum. Eleanor wandered into the study, where old books lined the shelves. She hadn't noticed them before. They seemed newer, less dusty. She reached for one at random and opened it. The pages were blank until she blinked. Then words bled through the paper, letters forming in wet black ink. You are the dreamer. You are the dream. She dropped the book, stumbling back. The words began to spread across the other books, across the walls, across her reflection in the glass. You are the dreamer. You are the dream. Eleanor screamed and covered her ears, but the words didn't stop. They whispered through her bones. Then, silence. The walls went still. The house seemed to be waiting. She sat on the floor shaking until something made her lift her head. A faint melody floated down from the attic, a lullaby, old and familiar. Her mother used to sing it. Eleanor's throat tightened. She rose slowly, one step at a time, drawn toward the sound. The air grew warmer the higher she climbed, thick with the smell of lavender and something metallic underneath. When she reached the attic door, she hesitated. The lullaby stopped. Then a woman's voice, soft, almost kind. "Come home, sweetheart." Eleanor's hand trembled on the doorknob. "I am home." "No," the voice replied, "not yet." She opened the door. The attic was different now. The walls glowed faintly with a red pulse, like veins illuminated beneath skin. The air shimmered as if underwater. In the center of the room stood her mother, or something that wore her mother's face. The figure smiled gently, eyes reflecting the candlelight like dark mirrors. "You built this for us, Ellie. You just forgot how to come back." Eleanor shook her head. "You're not real." The figure tilted its head. "What makes something real? Belief? Memory? Pain?" As she stepped closer, the light flickered,
and for a moment the figure's form wavered, revealing dozens of shapes behind it. The wooden statues from the basement, the unfinished bodies. Their heads all turned toward her at once. Eleanor stumbled back. "You've done this before," the thing said softly. "Each time you wake, you run, but you always build your way back." The metronome began ticking again. Tick, tick, tick. Eleanor clutched her head, memories flooding in flashes. A child standing by the window, a woman painting walls with her own blood, hands carving her name into wood again and again. The figure moved closer. "Do you see now? The house doesn't haunt you, darling. It remembers you." "No," Eleanor whispered. "I left. I grew up. I forgot this place." "You never left," the voice said, smiling wider. "You only dreamed you did." The attic began to distort, stretching and bending like a reflection on black water. The floor rippled beneath her feet. The air shimmered with fragments of sound, laughter, sobbing, a child's humming. Eleanor backed toward the wall, but it softened beneath her touch, warm and pulsing. Her hand sank in slightly before she could pull it free. She gasped. The wall exhaled. The figures behind the woman began to move, their wooden forms creaking, turning toward her. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly from within, like embers trapped in skulls. Eleanor screamed and bolted for the stairs, but the doorway was gone. The attic had no edges now, only endless shifting walls that breathed in rhythm with her panic. She turned, wild-eyed. "Let me out!" The voice of her mother, gentle again, whispered in her ear, though there was no one near her. "Why would you leave yourself?" The floor split open like a mouth. Eleanor fell. When she woke, she was standing in the hallway again. Everything was quiet, normal, the light soft and gray. Her heart still pounded, but there was no pulse in the walls, no whispers in her head. For a moment she thought it was over, that she had passed out, hallucinated everything. Then she noticed the photographs on the wall. They hadn't been there before. Each frame held a portrait of her, different ages, different clothes, but always the same expression: fear, recognition. And in each one, a shadow stood just behind her, hand resting gently on her shoulder. She reached toward one of the frames. Her fingers brushed the glass, and the photo moved. Her reflection inside turned her head, looked directly at her, and smiled. Eleanor stumbled back. The entire hallway seemed to shift with her movement, like the walls were breathing again.
From every frame, faint whispers rose. "Wake up, wake up, wake up." Her vision blurred. She ran toward the front door and twisted the handle. This time it opened. Cold air hit her face. The woods stretched before her, drenched in fog and silence. She stepped outside, barefoot, shaking. For the first time, she felt free, until she turned back. The house was gone. Only trees stood where it had been. For a second, relief filled her. Then she noticed the pattern of the trunks, the way their bark curved, the rhythm of their spacing. It was the same shape as the house's foundation. And from within the mist, she heard the faint ticking again. Tick, tick, tick. Eleanor started running. Through the woods, over wet leaves, her breath sharp in her chest. She didn't look back, not even when she thought she heard laughter behind her, her own voice echoing through the trees. Finally, she broke through the clearing and saw lights, civilization, the road to Cold Ash. She stumbled toward it, waving frantically as a car approached. The driver braked, rolling down the window, concern etched into his face. "Miss, are you all right? You look—"
He stopped. His eyes widened. "What?" she gasped. He stared at her, then at the road behind her. "Where did you come from? There's nothing back there but the old ruins." Eleanor turned slowly. The fog parted just enough for her to see. Charred stone walls, blackened timbers, the skeletal remains of a house long burned. She whispered, "No." The man frowned. "That place burned down in 1912, killed everyone inside. Been empty ever since." Her throat tightened. "That's not possible." He opened the passenger door. "You need help. Come on, I'll take you into town." She nodded numbly, climbed in. The car pulled away. Through the rear window, she watched the ruins fade into the mist until, for just a heartbeat, she saw lights flicker where the house should have been. And in the reflection of the glass beside her, her own face smiled back. Tick, tick, tick. Eleanor no longer trusted her senses. By the next evening, she couldn't tell whether the whispers came from the house or from her own thoughts. She tried plugging her ears, humming, anything to drown out the voices, but they always returned in rhythm with her heartbeat. Sometimes they used her name. Sometimes they repeated fragments of her own sentences, looping them back in distorted echoes. Sometimes they laughed. She caught her reflection smiling when she wasn't. In one mirror, her face blinked out of sync with her eyes. In another, her reflection turned away even when she stood still. She smashed every mirror in the house. The shards bled light like wounds, flickering faintly before going dark. But even then, she could still feel herself being watched. On the third night, she woke to find the front door wide open. Cold air pressed through it, carrying the scent of wet leaves and something sweetly rotten. The fog outside glowed faintly, pulsing as if alive. She stepped forward, barefoot, trembling. At the edge of the porch, she saw the child again, her own younger face, pale in the mist. The girl's hair clung to her cheeks as if soaked in dew. "You remember now," the child said softly. Eleanor shook her head. "No, I don't want to." "You already did. You dreamed us first." The fog swirled, thickening around them. Faces began to form inside it, faint outlines of all the women who had lived here before. Their mouths opened, moving in silent rhythm. The metronome's ticking returned, faint but steady, though Eleanor hadn't seen it since it shattered. Tick, tick, tick. The child stepped closer, eyes glowing faintly with reflected light. "You built this house from your sleep. Each time you woke, it waited, and each time you came back, you made it stronger." "I don't understand." "You don't have to. You are it." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the house's facade. Its wood seemed to ripple, the windows contracting like pupils, the roofline breathing as though the entire structure had become organic. Eleanor stumbled backward through the door, slamming it shut. The house shuddered, as if exhaling relief. Her chest burned with panic. "You're not real!" she screamed. But the house answered with a groan deep in its foundations, a sound like laughter rising from the bones of the earth. In a desperate attempt to ground herself, she opened her phone camera, pointed it around the room. The image on the screen didn't match reality. On the display, the walls were covered in writing, dark symbols moving and twisting like worms beneath the plaster. And behind her reflection stood dozens of shadowy figures watching. When she turned to look in real life, the room was empty. She faced the phone again. Now there was only one figure behind her. Closer. Her own reflection whispered through the speaker, the voice doubled and warped. "You can't wake up." The phone slipped from her hands, clattering to the floor. Every door in the house slammed at once.
The next time Eleanor opened her eyes, it was morning again, or something pretending to be morning. The light outside was colorless, and the trees stood unnaturally still, frozen in mid-motion. She went to the window and touched the glass. Her breath didn't fog it. And in that moment, she understood what had happened. She was no longer breathing. Her body was still, yet she was awake. Her reflection smiled, mimicking the realization. Now you see, you were never outside. The house isn't built around you, it's built from you. Eleanor whispered, "What am I?" Her reflection tilted its head. The dreamer, the dream, both. The walls began to tremble, faintly at first, then harder. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere deep within, the metronome started again, slower, heavier, like a dying heartbeat. Eleanor fell to her knees, clutching her chest. Each breath came with effort, each inhale dragging the sound of splintering wood. She realized she could feel the house breathing through her, the same rhythm matching her pulse. She whispered, "I don't want this." The air rippled around her, as if the house itself sighed. "It doesn't matter what you want. You are already home." By now, the boundary between Eleanor and the house had thinned to nothing. Every step she took echoed twice, once in the hall, once somewhere inside her skull. Her memories began to blur. When she tried to recall her old apartment, her mother's face, even the smell of the city streets, all she could see was wallpaper, cracked, breathing softly. The house was replacing everything. She wandered from room to room, half hoping the walls would collapse and release her. Instead, they pulsed with warmth, like veins under skin. The portraits on the walls, ones she hadn't noticed before, now showed faces shifting beneath the paint. Each time she passed, the eyes followed her. In one, the face almost matched hers. "Why me?" she whispered. From somewhere deep below came the child's voice again. "Because you never stopped dreaming of it. You wanted it to remember you." "I didn't." The voice softened. "You did when you were small. You used to talk to it at night. You said you'd build a house where no one could leave and no one could die." Her stomach turned. Fragments of memory slid into place. Childhood fevers, endless nightmares of a house whispering her name, promises whispered back in the dark. "I didn't mean it," she said, barely audible. But it did. The wall shuddered as if pleased by the confession. The lights dimmed to a dull amber. A door she'd never seen before appeared in the far wall, its frame pulsing faintly. She approached, unable to resist. Behind it lay the attic, but not as it had been. Now it stretched endlessly, filled with hundreds of metronomes ticking out of sync, the air thick with whispers. In the center stood the child. She held one of the carved figures from the basement, a wooden body with no face. Slowly, she lifted her hand and pressed her palm into the blank head. Flesh bloomed from the wood, shaping into Eleanor's own face. Then the figure opened its eyes. Eleanor's breath hissed. "What are you doing?" The child smiled sadly. "Finishing what you started." She stepped aside, revealing rows of identical figures behind her, each one wearing Eleanor's face, each one breathing faintly in rhythm with the ticking. Eleanor screamed, stumbling backward, but the attic stretched endlessly. The doorway behind her dissolved into the same living wood. The metronomes all began to speed up. Tick, 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 tick. The figure started whispering in unison, "Wake up." She clutched her head. "Stop! I want to wake up! Please!" The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became a roar. Then silence. When Eleanor opened her eyes again, she was standing at the front gate of the house, the morning air crisp and bright. The house looked old but harmless, just another ruin waiting to be restored. Her car sat in the driveway, packed with boxes. The realtor's key was in her hand. For a moment, she wondered if everything had been a dream. Then she noticed the metronome on the passenger seat, gleaming in the sunlight, its pendulum perfectly still. Carved into its base were the initials E.P. She laughed shakily, wiping her eyes. "Just a nightmare," she whispered. But as she turned the key in the ignition, the engine's hum began to sync with a rhythm she couldn't ignore. Tick, tick, tick. The road stretched ahead, mist curling along the trees. In the rear-view mirror, the house seemed to watch her go. And when she blinked, for the briefest moment, she saw her reflection in the mirror smile back. Not her tired, tearful smile, but the calm, knowing grin of something that had already won. The days following Mark's death were blurred shadows of reality. Evelyn remained in the house, unable to explain why she didn't flee. The police had come and gone, leaving behind a trail of questions and hollow reassurances. They ruled Mark's death an accident, a tragic fall during the night. No mention of the whispers, no acknowledgement of the house's shifting heartbeat. They didn't see the blood patterns that had formed faintly symmetrical spirals on the floor, nor the way the walls pulsed softly when she breathed. After the funeral, the air in the house grew thick. The faint tapping returned every night, no longer shy but deliberate. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. 1, 2, 3, 4. Always at 3:12 a.m. Evelyn started counting along like it was some kind of lullaby that kept her from dissolving into panic.
Sleep eluded her, and when it came, she dreamed of the rooms rearranging themselves, staircases looping in circles, hallways extending like throats. On the 5th night, she found a note tucked beneath her pillow. It was old paper, rough and yellowed. The handwriting was jagged and almost childlike. "The house remembers. The house needs you." Evelyn's breath hitched. She tore the sheet apart, but the words reappeared on her mirror the next morning, written in condensation. That was when she realized the house didn't just dream of her. It was awake now, fully, watching her, breathing her name through the cracks in the plaster. She tried to leave, packed a bag, slammed the front door behind her. But when she turned onto the gravel road, she saw the same house standing in front of her, identical, waiting, its windows dark and expectant. She turned around in terror. Behind her, again, the house. She screamed and ran down the road, her lungs burning, her feet bleeding, but every direction led her back to the same porch. It wasn't a location anymore. It was a loop. The house existed in her like a parasite. She fell to her knees, sobbing. The whispering began again, clearer this time, forming words that pulsed against her skull. "Stay," it murmured. "Don't leave us again." Again. That word cut her like a blade. Evelyn stumbled inside and grabbed the journal she'd found weeks earlier, the one she had never dared to read completely. She turned to the back, where several pages had been glued together. With trembling fingers, she pried them open. Between them was a photograph, old, faded. It showed a family of 4 standing in front of the same house, though it looked new, bright, freshly painted. The woman in the picture had Evelyn's face, her smile, her eyes. She flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back was a date, 1892, and a name written in that same jagged hand. Eleanor Hale. Her maiden name. Her blood ran cold. She had never been to this part of the country before, never seen this house before. That letter from the estate agent appeared in her mailbox.
except she couldn't remember what agency it had been. The envelope had no return address. She began to tremble uncontrollably. The house groaned, deep and resonant. The wallpaper peeled slightly, revealing black veins pulsing underneath, like capillaries under translucent skin. She stumbled backward, hitting the piano. The lid creaked open on its own, and then the notes began to play. Slowly, painfully slow, each key pressing down as if by invisible hands, the same melody Mark had played days before his death. Evelyn's tears blurred her vision. "What do you want from me?" she cried out. The air shimmered. From the piano bench, something began to rise, a silhouette, thin and elongated, its face undefined. But the voice that followed was unmistakable. "You never should have left," it whispered in Mark's voice. Her knees gave out. The shape twisted, stretching, cracking bones that weren't bones. From within its shifting form, dozens of faces appeared, women, men, children, flickering like trapped memories. Each whispered in unison, "We built this house for you. We waited." The lights flickered violently, the ground shook, the walls began to fold inward, bending like cloth. The staircase elongated, stretching toward her as if trying to swallow her whole. She turned and ran toward the door, but it was gone, replaced by endless, undulating walls. Her heart thundered as she found herself in a hallway she didn't recognize. Portraits lined the walls, all of her. Different ages, different clothes, different eras. In some she was smiling, in others screaming. One portrait at the end caught her attention. It was painted, not photographed. Her expression was serene, her eyes closed, and in her lap rested a small wooden box. She approached it. The painted box was identical to the one she'd found in the attic. As she stared, the portrait's eyes snapped open. "Wake up," the painted Evelyn said, and the world tore apart. She woke up on the floor of the master bedroom, gasping. The morning light filtered weakly through the curtains, and for a brief moment she believed it had all been a nightmare. The piano was silent, the air still, but when she tried to stand, she saw the marks on her arms, black fingerprints, deep and burnt into her skin. The phone on the nightstand rang once, just once. When she lifted it, there was no tone, no voice, only the faint, rhythmic tapping. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then, faintly a voice on the line whispered, "The house isn't dreaming anymore, Evelyn. You are." The line went dead. Evelyn dropped the phone and stumbled to the window. The world outside was wrong. The sky was too pale, the trees perfectly still, like a painted scene. There was no sound of wind, no distant birds. Even the gravel driveway looked frozen in place. She pressed her hand to the glass. It was warm, pulsing faintly, like skin. Her reflection stared back at her, but not quite. The eyes were different, older, wiser. And when it smiled, she didn't. The reflection raised its hand and wrote across the fogged glass from the inside. "Block 7 begins when you remember what you did." Evelyn stumbled backward, heart hammering, as the tapping began again, echoing from the walls, from the mirror, from the floorboards beneath her feet. Evelyn pressed her palms to her temples, trying to drown out the tapping that now came from everywhere, the walls, the mirror, the floorboards beneath her feet. The rhythm was maddening, like a heartbeat trying to sync with her own. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. 1, 2, 3, 4. It pulsed with every breath, faster the more she tried to ignore it. Her reflection in the window still stared at her, lips parted in almost a pitying smile. Behind that reflection, the world outside rippled, like heat rising off asphalt. The longer she looked, the more she realized that the trees weren't frozen, they were swaying, but backward, their branches moving in unnatural patterns as if the world beyond the glass followed its own laws of time. She whispered, "What did I do?" Her reflection tilted her head and mouthed, "You promised."
Something inside her cracked open at that word, promised. She saw flashes of things she didn't remember living, a candle-lit room, laughter echoing against wood-paneled walls, children's voices calling her Mama. The house, but not in decay, bright, alive, and her hand, younger, unscarred, pressing against the same window she stood before now. She stumbled backward and collided with the nightstand. The wooden box she'd brought down from the attic was there, as if waiting. She hadn't noticed it before, hadn't even remembered bringing it here. Trembling, she opened the lid. Inside lay a small brass key, darkened with age. Beneath it, folded neatly, was another letter. She unfolded it, the paper brittle and brown around the edges. If you are reading this, then you broke your vow. The house remains, but it grows hungry without you. The others will wake, the walls will remember the blood. Return to where it began.
No signature. Her breathing came fast and shallow. She looked again at the key. It was engraved with a number, 1892. The same year written on the back of the photograph. She left the bedroom and wandered through the house, the key clutched tight in her fist. Every step seemed to echo through more than one reality. Her footsteps doubled back, slightly delayed, like someone walking just behind her, mimicking her movements. The house had changed again. The walls now leaned inward, the ceiling lower, pressing down on her. She could hear faint music drifting through the air, the same piano melody, only this time slower, distorted, as if underwater. When she reached the staircase, she noticed something new, a door at the base of it, one she swore hadn't been there before. Its keyhole was ornate and old-fashioned, lined with black iron. The brass key in her hand pulsed warmly, almost vibrating. She knelt and slid it in. The lock turned with a deep, resonant click. The door opened onto a narrow staircase spiraling downward, swallowed by darkness. A faint red glow pulsed at the bottom, matching the rhythm of the tapping. She hesitated, but the whispering began again, louder now, almost pleading. "Come home, Evelyn. You left us to rot." She descended. The air grew thicker with every step. The smell of earth and mildew was joined by something metallic, sweet, blood. The glow intensified until she reached the bottom, stepping into a vast, circular chamber beneath the house. The walls were stone, slick with moisture. Dozens of candles flickered in niches carved into the rock. At the center of the room stood an altar. On it lay a single object, an ancient leather-bound book. Its cover was cracked and blackened, but faint gold lettering still shimmered on the front. Domus somniat te. She whispered the words aloud. The house dreams of you. The moment she spoke them, the candles flared, their flames bending toward her. The tapping stopped. Everything went silent, like the house was holding its breath. Then, a single voice rose from the darkness. A woman's voice, familiar and distant, layered with 100 others behind it. We gave you this life, Evelyn. You begged for it. Shapes began to emerge from the shadows, faint outlines of people, flickering like candlelight. Their faces were indistinct, but all of them turned toward her. The nearest one stepped forward, a woman in a long black dress, her face half-rotted, eyes hollow yet full of recognition. You wanted to forget, she whispered. You wanted to escape what you did to us. Evelyn's body trembled violently. Who are you? The woman smiled with broken teeth. Your children. Evelyn stumbled backward, shaking her head. No, I never had. But then the memories hit like a tidal wave. 2 children laughing in a sunlit garden, a husband, stern, kind-eyed. The same house, its walls warm and alive with love. And then the storm, the fire, screams that echoed through her bones. She had been holding the book, Domus somniat te, and chanting words she didn't understand, begging for the house to save them.
but the house had taken them instead, pulling their souls into its foundation, leaving her alive, alone, immortal, trapped in cycles of rebirth and forgetting. Her knees gave out. The whispers became deafening, no longer pleading but furious. You left us to burn. And every life you've lived since then, the house called you back. You always return, you always promise, you always forget. Evelyn clutched her head, screaming. The stone floor beneath her began to split, revealing red light and writhing shadows beneath. She saw faces in the cracks, her family's faces, reaching for her with hands of ash. I didn't know, she cried. I didn't remember. Then remember now, the chorus said. The floor gave way. Evelyn plunged into the light, her screams swallowed by the house's hungry breath. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying on the living room floor. Morning light streamed through the window, gentle and golden. The house looked normal, clean, bright, perfectly still. Her body was unmarked, her clothes were different. An old-fashioned dress, ivory lace and buttons. On the wall, a calendar read, April 2nd, 1892. Someone knocked at the door. Evelyn rose, her body moving without thought, and opened it. A man stood on the porch, young, handsome, wearing a dusty hat. He smiled warmly. Good morning, Mrs. Hale. I brought the deeds to finalize your purchase. Fine home you've got here. They say it was built to last forever. Evelyn looked past him at the horizon, at the same gravel road stretching endlessly into the mist. Behind her, in the hallway mirror, her reflection stood a step closer than she was, smiling faintly. From somewhere deep in the walls came the first faint tap. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rhythm of the house beginning again. The sound began as a faint heartbeat behind the walls, steady, patient, eternal. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. 1, 2, 3, 4. Evelyn stood frozen at the doorway, the sunlight spilling across her shoes, bright and wrong. It wasn't the thin, cold light she remembered. It had warmth, but not the kind that touched skin. It was the kind that burned. The man on the porch, the one who'd brought the deed, tilted his head and smiled again. It's beautiful, isn't it? Houses like this. They remember their owners. They keep them. Something about his tone made her throat tighten. She nodded numbly, stepping aside to let him in. His boots made no sound against the polished wood. The moment he crossed the threshold, every candle in the room flickered to life, hundreds of them, appearing from nowhere. Her breath caught.
The man removed his hat. His eyes were black, not voids, not shadows, but filled with shifting movement, as though a storm lived behind his pupils. You've done this many times, he said softly. Signed the papers, claimed what was already yours, and every time you swear you'll never forget again. Evelyn's lips trembled. Who are you? He smiled faintly. The house's memory. The air thickened, and the faint heartbeat grew louder. The floor vibrated beneath her feet. She stumbled back as the wallpaper rippled, revealing flashes of another time. Fire roaring through the rooms, children's screams, and her own voice shouting words she didn't understand. The memory played like a film projected on every wall. You prayed for salvation, the man said, his voice layered now, echoing with countless others. You wanted to cheat death. The house offered you eternity. But every century you forget what eternity means. The images shifted. Evelyn kneeling in front of the same altar she'd seen in the cellar, the book Domus Somnia Te open before her. Save them, she whispered in the vision. Take me instead. But the house hadn't taken her instead. It had taken everything. The man reached into his coat and drew out something small and black, the same brass key she had found in the future. "Every cycle begins with this," he said. "The key, the vow, the death, the forgetting. The house doesn't dream of you, Evelyn. It is you." She stared at him, her pulse racing. "No, no, that's not possible." He smiled again, kind, sad. "Every wall here was built from your fear. Every door sealed with your guilt. Every whisper is a thought you tried to bury." He stepped closer, extending the key. "It's time to wake up." Evelyn backed away, shaking her head violently. "I won't do this again. I'll burn it down." But when she turned toward the window, the world beyond it was gone. Only endless darkness stretched outside, pulsing like a living thing. The horizon breathed, the trees twisted into shapes of faces, her own multiplied. "You can't destroy yourself," he murmured. "You can only remember." The tapping stopped. Silence filled the room, thick, absolute. Evelyn's chest tightened as she realized she could hear her own heartbeat slowing, syncing perfectly with the house's rhythm. The floorboards began to glow faintly red. From the walls, liquid shadows poured like ink, forming human figures, the ones she'd seen before in the basement. Her family, her children, her husband. They circled her in silence, their eyes empty but familiar. Her husband spoke first. His voice was calm, almost tender. "We forgave you long ago, Evelyn, but you never forgave yourself. You bound us here. Every time the fire returns, we live it again." Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to save you." He stepped closer and touched her cheek. His hand was cold but solid. "Then let it end. This time, don't run. Don't wake. Stay." The word "stay" vibrated through her body, resonating with the house itself. She looked around, the portraits, the furniture, the glowing walls. Everything was trembling, like the house itself was afraid. "What happens if I stay?" she whispered. Her husband smiled. "The house sleeps, and when it sleeps, we do too." Evelyn looked at the key in the man's outstretched hand. Her heart pounded. Behind her, the house began to groan, timber bending, glass shattering in the upper floors. She felt its pain, her pain, spreading through her ribs like fire. Slowly, she reached out and took the key. The moment her fingers touched it, the candles went out all at once. Darkness swallowed everything. For a heartbeat, she heard nothing but her own breathing. Then, faintly, the piano began to play, that same slow, sorrowful melody. Evelyn closed her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and turned the key. There was no explosion, no scream, no collapse, just silence. The air shifted, cool and still. When she opened her eyes again, she stood in a field of tall silver grass under a gray sky. The house was there, far away, crumbling quietly. For the first time, it looked truly dead. She felt the wind touch her face, real wind. The sound of it made her cry. She turned and saw her husband and children standing nearby, their faces gentle, clear, human. Her daughter reached out, taking her hand. "Can we go home now, Mama?" Evelyn nodded, her throat too tight to speak. As they began to walk, the world around them started to fade, not into darkness, but into light, the kind that feels like morning. Back inside the ruins of the house, centuries later, a team of developers walked through the overgrown remains, discussing restoration plans. One of them brushed aside vines from a stone plaque near the foundation. It read, "Evelyn Hale, 1864 to 1892. Beloved mother, keeper of dreams. Creepy, one of the workers muttered. Didn't even know this place was that old. His co-worker laughed. Let's just hope it's not haunted. As they left, the wind picked up, whistling softly through the cracked windows. Somewhere deep inside the rubble, faint and rhythmic, came a sound barely audible under the sigh of the breeze. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause, then silence. The house, at last, had stopped dreaming.